All right, so welcome to afternoon session starting here. My name is Jason Conger, and this is Warren Simondson, and we'll be your presenters for today's session. Today's session is titled Mobile Enterprise Applications, FUIT, or ITFTW, which stands for IT for the win. So let's figure out what it is, FUIT or ITFTW. So again, like I said, I'm Jason Conger. My background is a very Citrix type background, desktop virtualization background, but also on a kind of a hobby and professionally doing some application development. And most of it is Windows application development. And with the onslaught of mobile devices lately, it's really trying to take that knowledge base and turning it into a mobile world, and how can we do that? And this is Warren Simondson of Control-Alt-Delete. I'll let you introduce yourself.
You just did.
Yeah.
I'm from Australia. I've been doing a little bit of coding for a long time, a lot of Citrix for a long time. The mobility kit that came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago now, roughly, I've been sort of heavily involved in sort of doing some sample code, some freeware code for everyone to use. So my background is not so much a programmer. I used to be a school teacher, and people say, what sort of school teacher? Maths, science, and I was actually a woodshop teacher or a woodwork teacher. So I used to spin timber and teach kids how to put birdhouses together, which is really good. So I moved into IT and got into Citrix and did a little bit of programming in the background. So as a coder, I'm a C++ coder, but I dabble in a few other things as well. So this is where I've got into this world from now.
All right. So enough about us. So the premise of this session, which I kind of mentioned, is in the past, delivering desktops, we've kind of known how to do it. The desktop, traditionally, you go put a desktop on somebody's desk, and normally that desktop is corporately owned, right? So since it's corporately owned, that means you know a lot of things about that desktop. You know the capabilities of that desktop, you have a certain model base that you're doing, and you know everything about that desktop because you procured it, right? And since you know everything about that desktop, you know how to deliver applications to that desktop. You have lots of choices. You have Active Directory delivering. You have things with System Center, Citrix, VMware, AppV, all of these kind of things that you know how to deliver apps to the desktop, and you have lots of choices to do that. So now with this whole BYOD thing really taking off, users are bringing in their own device, and there's lots of different devices. And the problem is, you take that same slide, the apps generally are not corporately owned. The user brings in their own device. And since they're not corporately owned, you lose all your knowledge of the types of devices they're bringing in. They're bringing in Android, they're bringing in Galaxy tablets, they're bringing in iPads, whatever. You don't know what they're bringing in anymore. And since you don't know, you lose a lot of your abilities that you had before to deliver applications to these devices. So you lose your things like Windows. They're not Windows anymore. You can still do some things like Citrix and RDP and VMware, Aircom, things like that. But a lot of the main backbone tools that you had before, forget it. You don't have that anymore. So what are we dealing with now? So as an administrator, we're dealing with all these things. We got Apple devices and Android and HTML5 and Windows devices. And so you have to expand your skill set. So the thing that you're dealing with now is a mismatch of everything. So you have to provide access to your corporate applications to everything. So the question is, how do I do it? How do I mobilize and deliver enterprise apps to empower your users? Because the users are bringing it in whether you want it or not. Tough, you have to deal with it, right? So how do I do it? Well, this next slide is kind of like Brian's triangle that he had this morning. Fast, easy, cheap, pick two. Well, this is kind of the same thing. So how can you do it today? So if you just want to virtualize an existing application as is, you see here the user experience as it goes up and the application development effort as it goes up. If you want it something really quick and easy, you're down here at this bottom corner, and the user experience suffers. So if you just go say, I'm going to publish a desktop on an iPad, boom, you're done, right? The people don't want that. That sucks. So just doing what you have today, virtualizing what you have today, not a great user experience. If you want to rely on a third party to develop an application, the user experience is great. There's still no real development effort on your part because a third party did it. But you have to just keep features with whatever they give you, so you get what they give, right? The next thing you have is a really good user experience and requires a lot of application development effort on yours. So if you're going to build your own, meaning I'm going to build an iOS thing or I'm going to build an Android thing, that takes a lot of effort, a lot of skill set to do, but provides a really good user experience, but a lot of time in order to do it. So what we have here is a convergence zone is what we're talking about today. So how can I mobilize my enterprise applications without a lot of specialized development like iOS and like Android and all that? How do I do that? Well, we're talking about this convergence zone. We're making our existing apps mobile. And so Gartner predicts from 2012 to 2018 that just VB6 migration will be a $1.0 billion business. You can take that with a grain of salt because I think by 2013, which is now, Gartner predicted VDI would be $13 billion, and I don't think that happened.
Yes, it did. Somewhere.
I don't know.
Gartner makes some very interesting calls these days, and as Jason said, take it with a grain of salt. But
yeah.
in all realism, VB6 coders out there know that the world's changing, and they have to move with it. So I think I still see many, many VB6 codes out there, and we've got to change sometime. We can only hang on so long.
Yep. All right. So that's enough setup, right? You guys pretty much knew everything I talked about just now. So the rest of this session really does just talking about two things. We're going to focus on that convergence zone. We're not here to teach you how to do iOS or Android. We're here to focus on that convergence zone of how do I take my existing applications and make them mobile ready, right? Two ways we can do it. The first one is easy, things that we're not going to involve any kind of code whatsoever. So what we're about to talk about now, you can go home after this conference and do these things right away. The next thing we're going to talk about is coding. That's why I brought Warren along, because he's the master coder, and he just whips out all this free code. It's great, lots of people use it. So he's going to show you some coding methods on some things that you can do to make your existing applications mobile. So you may not be a coder, but maybe you can take some of these ideas back to some people that do coding, or if you are a coder, great, we'll teach you a few more things.
And that's the key here. You don't have to be a coder, and that's why I introduced myself as a former school teacher, because I didn't get taught how to code. I just had a little bit of fun over time. So the two methods that Jason's showing, non-coding and coding, you can do it. It's not hard. It just takes a little bit of time, and you've got to understand your own apps. And that's the key to what we're doing here. Understand your apps. Don't understand, if you think you're going to convert SAP, for example, into a mobile app, good luck. It's not going to happen. But if you've got an in-house app that you think you want to convert, and the boss is on your case to get a mobile team together, and within 10 minutes you want some Android or iPhone app, then you can say, oh, let's take a step back. Let's have a look at how we can work towards that. By the time we get an iPhone team in and various development teams in, that's a year, 2 years development time. We could do this maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And someone says, that's a big call, 2 or 3 weeks to convert an app. It depends on the app. I'm not stupid. I know there's lots of apps out there. But the basic apps that you need to get productivity out of quickly, that won't fit on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device, that's what we're here to look at from the coding point of view as well, and the non-coding point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So, without further ado, let's look at some methods that don't involve any code that you can do today. So before we start to talk about this, I broke up some technologies into some categories here. So the main things we'll talk about are really RDP based first. So you have like vWorkspace, Aircom, traditional Microsoft TS. Some things that are not RDP based, like PC over IP with VMware. This FrameHawk one is an interesting one. That actually looks on the wire, and that will do some things with mobilizing things, but it looks actually on the wire, the bits on the wire. Citrix HDX there at the bottom is kind of its own animal because it is a hybrid crossbreed. And then some things that are based on HTML5, which we'll talk about that a little bit more. These clients are mobile clients that are based on HTML5 to give you some capability on mobility. So these are your remoting protocols that we're talking about here, right? So for these remoting protocols that are really RDP, or actually any remoting protocol that you're delivering a Windows app, there's some things that you can do within Windows. So when your finger is your primary input device for a mobile app, because keyboards are a thing of the past with a mobile device, your finger is the main thing. And if you're trying to publish an app to a small form factor, there's some things you can do today to make it easier. So you'll see some things highlighted in red. You can go through and make some registry modifications to make these things bigger, because that little bitty X button, a lot of times you'll miss it, or maybe you're trying to do a maximize app and you accidentally close it because you hit the X, or you're trying to scroll left and right and it's very hard to get that scroll bar. There's some things you can do to make those things bigger. And you'll notice there's a little Word document. When you guys go download this presentation, you can click on that little Word document right here, the Word document in the presentation, double click that. That's the registry settings that you can go put in to make these things bigger. So it makes your primary input of your finger easier to use by making things bigger. So that's non-coding method number 1 that we can use, right? Another thing that you can do that doesn't involve any code is a lot of people use Excel, right? Microsoft Excel. So what some people, I've seen this done before, is you treat each window as a kind of a mobile device screen. So this is one Excel spreadsheet with multiple device screens here, and the bad thing about it is you do have, there's multiple device sizes now, so it's going to be kind of specific to device. So this is an iPhone-sized screen, and so you can think of your iPhone as kind of like a window viewer on those screens, and you can swipe across and see that. So if you have Excel spreadsheets that you're trying to give somebody versus scrolling all around, you can do that. And a lot of the devices support a swipe that goes that many pixels over. So if your size is 320 pixels, like this one, you can have a swipe, a special gesture swipe, that will only go that many pixels over. So when you do this special gesture swipe, it just goes that much over. So that's a method that you can do as well. The next method that we'll talk about is if you have a XenApp environment. So if you're a Citrix XenApp shop, there is a piece of software that you can install called the Citrix Mobility Pack. Now, the Citrix Mobility Pack adds on to an existing XenApp environment. The main things, this is the architecture. I'm not going to go in deep into the architecture, but the main things right here are these 2 virtual channels. So this box over here is receiver. This box over here is XenApp server. And there's 2 virtual channels that were introduced. When you install your mobility pack, there's 2 virtual channels. One of them is that MRVC, that's mobile receiver virtual channel, and that's going to give you access to things like orientation of your device. It's going to give you things to your screen size, camera, things like that. It gives you access to your mobile device features. The second virtual channel is location. And the reason, and that's going to give you like your GPS coordinates. The reason they're separated out is because sometimes people want access to those features, like the device features, but because of privacy reasons, they can't enable GPS. So that's separated out because you can control this by policy. So I can go over here and either through group policy or XenApp policy, you have this piece over here where I can allow the location to be broadcast from my receiver to the XenApp server. So that can be turned on or off depending on situation. So if you have privacy concerns, you can turn that off, but still get access to everything else. Okay? The other thing that the Mobility Pack introduces is something called the mobile desktop. Again, I mentioned that if you go publish a desktop to some mobile device, then the input, the user experience is kind of poor. So here you have a start menu, and it's kind of hard to click on folders and all this. So you can go enable a mobile desktop. And what happens is when somebody launches that desktop from a mobile device, it kind of, you can think of it as reskinning the device, reskinning the desktop. It's doing that plus a lot more, so it's changing some of the behavior as well. So we have a nicer UI here with some start buttons. It looks more native. The clicking on things is a little bit easier with your finger. So rather than show you, tell you, I'll show you. So what I have here is I have running on my laptop a XenApp server, a VM, and here I have on my iPad, I'm going to connect to that XenApp server. Make sure this comes on. So I'm using AirPlay from my iPad to go over to my computer so I can show you what's going on. So just, you can see on my iPad, that's what's showing up on the screen. Question over here?
When you install the mobility pack, where is it applied? Is it applied at the server level or at app level, or when you buy
All right, so the question was, when I install the mobility pack, is it on a server level, device level, application level? Yeah. So where does it start to affect? So it is on the server. So that the mobility pack is really just giving you capabilities. So it's turning on those virtual channels, allowing some capabilities, allowing you to see these devices. Those capabilities are controlled via policy, so if you don't want them to apply, they won't. And then what I'm about to show you here with the desktop is, again, this is another policy. You can turn this on or off. So all of this stuff is on or off. And so, you know, it gives you, A, the mobility pack, all this mobile stuff, but B, when we get into mobile SDK, it gives you access to the devices. So if you're writing your own app, you can get access to device properties. Did I answer your question? No. Okay. Ask it a different way.
Let me ask it in a different way. If you're going to turn it on by policy, you turn it on for an app and the app will look the same if you connect from a desktop as it would usually, and different if you connect from a mobile device?
All right, so okay, I think I understand the question better. So if I turn on the policy, and I launch an app from a desktop, is it going to look the same or different than when I launch it from a mobile app? And the answer is, it will look, from a desktop, it'll look like it's from a desktop. It looks like it's supposed to. This only applies when you're going from a mobile device, because there's smarts in here to say, if you're a mobile device, do this. If not, business as usual. Did I answer your question that time?
Very good, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so here we go.
One quick note, Jason.
Yep.
Important note, this mobility pack is actually a hotfix for XenApp 6.5. It's not a separate sort of package that you get. It is a separate package, but it's a hotfix. So you'll see it as a hotfix when you download it from the site. So once you install it, you have to actually download two things, a hotfix and then the add-on to the Citrix Policies, or it's not Citrix Policies, is it? It's actually just a standard MMC add-on. So you have to actually install both things on the XenApp servers, on all XenApp servers. Okay, that's an important point to note. So when you say, is it coming from an app point, etc., Jason's right. Pure server point of view, and the policies turn it on. So if I go into an app and I've turned on the policy to say, you're mobile aware, there's another sort of part of that which Jason, I'm sure, will allude to, well, he does allude to soon. It's how you publish the app also. So you can make the actual app itself aware of mobility using this pack as well. But Jason will cover that shortly.
Yeah, if this will actually launch. It's having a delay launch, so if it, I'm not sure why, this worked earlier. But yeah, so we'll move on while I wait for this to launch. I'm not sure why it's launching today. All right, so anyway, once this launches, it will have the desktop, and it will have like the mobile desktop version of it. But since it's not launching, we'll move on.
I may have a backup.
Huh?
I may have a backup for you.
Nah, it's all good. All right, so we'll come back to demo if and when it launches. Carry on. It's not that exciting anyway. All right, so the other thing that the mobility pack does is when it detects that you are running from a mobile device, it will enable certain native device features. So if I publish an application and when I move my cursor to a text box, normally nothing happens. You would have to go click a button for a keyboard to pop up, and then sometimes that keyboard will cover up some of your screen real estate. With this mobility pack, what happens is when you click in that device, that text box, a keyboard pops up automatically. The screen resolution changes to not cut anything off, and then you have your native keyboard. It's the native device's keyboard. It's not some emulated keyboard, it's the native device's keyboard. Also, whenever you click a drop-down window, like a combo box in an application, sometimes that's very, very small and it's hard to see. So what this will do is it will turn on the native device's scroll bar to be able to go and click on that particular option. So you'll see here in the screenshot, you click in the text box, keyboard pops up. You click on a drop-down list, the native device's picker comes up, and you're able to choose an option to go. All right? And I had a demo for that as well. Let's see if I can get that working. And I believe I'll just go close my user here. That's all right. 1 second, guys.
The important thing to note about this, as I said, it's 6.5 only. I get a lot of people saying, oh, can I use XenApp 5, things like that. No, 6.5 only with Feature Pack 2 or 1, I think it is. So just be aware of that. Yep. Feature Pack 1?
Yep.
Yeah, so thanks for that. Is it 2 out? I don't think it is. But yeah, so be aware of that. It is free. It's not sort of a platinum edition or whatever the case might be. So, you can readily install it. And, once it's on, you don't really have to think about it. The other thing to point out too, I talked about the group policy add-on. That can actually be added to anywhere where you're doing group policy. So the group policy add-on for the Citrix Mobility Kit can be installed on a Windows 7 machine, anything, because it's a plugin essentially. Okay. The Mobility Pack itself, of course, is only for XenApp.
All right. Well, that's not working either. I'm not sure why.
So I hope my demos work. We'll
Yeah.
find out.
We'll find out. Yes. All right. Well, actually, it is working now. Okay. So here we go. Let's maximize this. All right. So here we go. So this is the mobile desktop, right? Let me close Server Manager here. This is the mobile desktop. This is from my iPad here. So things that happen is you have this start menu here, and your folders look and feel more native. It's easier to navigate. So clicking My Documents, things kind of scroll around very easily. Also, you'll have things like the My Computer. I mentioned it changes some of the behavior. So this My Computer applet is different. So I can browse my different drives and launch things, whatever I need to do. So that's the user experience there. The other thing on the demo for clicking in the text box and showing the native keyboard and the native device picker is on this published application. So this published application is character map. It's part of any Windows installation, and it allows you to insert special characters into documents. And I'm not sure why it's taking a little bit to launch there. I think we're almost there. I don't know. Here we go. All right. So this particular application, like I said, is part of any Windows installation. So you'll notice when I click on this bottom text box, what happens is the native keyboard pops up, and I'm able to type in some things. Also, I don't know if you know this or not, but when you're doing a published application, if you don't have the keyboard there, if something doesn't work, you can use 3 fingers to tap anywhere. So 3-finger tap will bring up a keyboard as well. Also, I mentioned that clicking the drop-down list, normally that would be very hard to navigate on a mobile device, but clicking it here, you'll see the native device picker comes up, and I'm able to scroll through and pick what I want as well. So that, again, we're in non-coding methods right now. That makes life a lot easier for your end users, right? So going back to demo mode, or to presentation mode here. Questions on, yeah, I got a question right here.
Would the drop-down list with checkboxes work?
So the question is, would drop-down lists with checkboxes work as well? It depends. Not all of these work sometimes, because the way Citrix is actually going through and enabling these types of behavior is really through accessibility options. So when you go through on Windows and you enable accessibility options for things, like screen resolution or your color scheme and things like that, one of them has to do with the drop-down picker. So it has to make that native Windows call to be able to do that. If your app is making a native Windows call and not using some special kind of control, then it should pop up. Your mileage may vary. So I have had some other programs that this did not work because they were using some other call to do this drop-down list versus the native built-in Windows call. So maybe. I wish I had a more definitive answer for you. Other questions real quick? Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to show you is when you publish applications in Citrix, there's several different kind of directives you can give. There's this keywords mobile. There's actually multiple keywords you can put. If you put this in the description of your published application, cool stuff happens. It directs Citrix to say, do these extra things for your end user. They're all configurable options, but it kind of does some configuration for you out of the box. So, I won't read all these things to you because you can read it yourself, but a couple just to point out are things like, let's see, we'll go to this again. A couple things to point out that it said it disables the zooming. So if I try to zoom in on an app, actually, I didn't launch it. I don't have the keyboards mobile on here. I was going to show it on a demo, but normally if you zoom in and out like that, that happens. If I had the keywords mobile on here, that would not happen. And then the drag mode right here, if I click and drag like this, the window, I have to double click to drag, it will automatically do that for you as well. Okay. And that is enough about that. Let's talk about coding methods. Okay. The first thing I want to talk about on coding methods is, I already mentioned this. I didn't mean for that to happen. I already mentioned this, but if you want to do coding, if you want to do your own coding stuff, I'm waiting. Then, all right, so if you want to do your own coding stuff, then, you want to do iOS, then I need Objective-C coder, and I need Xcode. You actually need a Mac as well. If you want to do Android, you're talking about Java. If you want to do Windows, you're talking about .NET. All of these things that you're going to have very specialized things to be able to do mobile applications natively, right? If you don't want to do native applications, but you still want to get closer to your device, there are a couple of options there. We already mentioned this first one is HTML5. So HTML5, if you're running an app, a web app with HTML5, you can get some access to some of the mobile device features. You can get things like GPS. You can do some of the other pieces that the mobile device will do. But there are some companies that have started with a native application, gone to HTML5, and are recently going back to native because HTML5 hasn't lived up to some of the hopes that we had. Some of the memory consumption on HTML5, and then the user experience with HTML5 hasn't been exactly what people wanted as well. So another option is something called PhoneGap. PhoneGap is really cool. It's a kind of a framework for applications. It's a wrapper. And PhoneGap allows you to, the idea behind PhoneGap, it allows you to write web code. So there's a lot of web developers out there. They're very easy to find versus specialized iOS developers or Android developers. Those are harder to find, they're more expensive. But there are a ton of web developers out there and that can do HTML and JavaScript, right? So the idea behind PhoneGap is we'll give you a framework that gives you access to the native device features, but you write your actual code with HTML and JavaScript. Now, you would think this might be an HTML5 app, but actually what happens is you compile this, it becomes a native iOS app. You have to have a like Xcode on your Mac, and you can actually upload this to the App Store. There are apps that are in the Mac App Store now that are written with PhoneGap. You can use the same HTML stuff that you do and use it with Android and put it on the Android marketplace. But the code base that you're maintaining is the same no matter what. And some of the things that PhoneGap gives you access to are things like accelerometer, a camera, a compass, geolocation, local storage, all these things. PhoneGap gives you access to that device's functions. And then you have one code base that you maintain. So, time for a PhoneGap demo. So what I have here is I wrote a very, very simple application with PhoneGap. And this, as you can see, I'm in Xcode just because I have to do that. I'm actually compiling code, but the code that I wrote is all just HTML. If I can get scrolling over here. So what happens here is, let me scroll back out so I can scroll up on the bar here. So you can see this is just HTML, right? There's a doc tag right there, and then you can see like a title tag and all this, and then we start some JavaScript. So you'll see this first line up here, that's that thing that says Cordova, that's just the code name for PhoneGap. And so that includes the PhoneGap framework. And then I just have some JavaScript functions. Most of them are empty, but what we're going to do here is I want to show an alert. And this is going to, again, this is going to be a native iOS application when I run it. And we're going to take in some text, and we're going to show you that on an alert with PhoneGap. And like I said, this could be run on your phone It can be published to the App Store. It is a native application that we wrote in HTML instead of your Objective-C. So here, I'll go put in, so hi, demos aren't going great, just to show that, it is actually what I'm typing here. And I click this notify button, and it pops up notify. Now you'll notice there's a drop-down list for types of notify. You could say flash, you could say vibrate. All those things are in the framework to allow you to get access to that native device's features. All right? So that is, and then basically, like I said, you could take this same HTML, put it in your, bring up your Android development environment, compile it, and then you have an Android app. Same HTML there as you do on your iOS. So that's the idea behind PhoneGap. They give you access to all that stuff. Yes, sir, question?
Is it possible to link other C modules to it?
So the question is it possible to link other C modules to it? Yes, we are creating an actual Objective-C for, you start going into your specific things. For Objective-C for this, yes, you can do that because this is creating a native application. So yes, you can do that. Okay? Other questions? All right. So the next thing we'll talk about, again, we're still with coding. The problem, PhoneGap is really cool, but for enterprises, the problem starts to come in with your data. So your application is running on your mobile device. A lot of times the data that you want to access is on your enterprise. Now you have to start thinking about things like either a VPN or some kind of local storage sync or things like this, so it becomes problematic. So the other piece to the mobile application or the mobility pack with that hotfix that Warren mentioned, when you install that on XenApp, if you're, again, this is talking about a XenApp environment, is you can run these applications and kind of do the same thing PhoneGap did with the Citrix Mobile Application SDK. Get access to the mobile device's features, run your code set with whatever application you want, because now it's Windows, and be able to get things like orientation, GPS, accelerometer, things like this, but it runs on a server in your data center. So that virtual channel from your mobile device, virtual channel up to your data center, is sending things like, here's my location, here's my orientation, here's the camera. It gives you access to all that, but the app itself is not running on the device. It's running on a server in your data center. So this is, I'm not going to read all these things to you. There's a link to see all the things that the mobile application SDK will give you, all the features. Excuse me. So what I'm going to do now is just show you an example of one. So this is an application that I wrote, and the idea behind this is, I got this idea from actually the stock app on a on an iPhone. So if you're looking at stocks on your iPhone and you see all your symbols and you turn it sideways, it shows you a graph of performance of that stock over time. So it's responding to orientation. So the same thing here. So here's a quick app that I wrote. It's pulling some data about clients that are connecting to your environment. It shows you a pretty graph up top, and it shows you the raw data behind the graph at the bottom. So this is what it would look like on Windows. The problem is, this is a lot of screen real estate, and if you look at it on a mobile device, it's really hard to see. So the idea is, respond to a mobile device. Same application. These are not separate executables, same application, but now whenever you start it, it starts with just looking at the graph. You click the graph, and you'll see that you can change the graph, and if you turn the device sideways, it will show you the raw data behind the graph. And also some things that happen in the responsive design, a lot of the stuff with Windows, like the Chrome, all the blue title bar and the minimize, maximize button, they're gone, the menu structure's gone, and everything changes on you. So let's check out a demo of that. Just to show you, I'm not just showing a screenshot here. Okay. So assuming this is going to work out okay for us. I should have started this earlier. Well, I don't know why these are starting so slow now. Well, I'll wait on that. We'll go back to presentation for right now. All right, this was the responsive design demo. I'll wait on this and I'll come back to it when it starts. But now we're going to go into some of Warren's apps that he's written for using the same mobile application SDK and some of the use cases that he's had. So handing it over to Warren.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, so I like to talk and walk, and the cameraman's going to hate me because I'm going to walk into the crowd too. So if you've got questions, two things I always notice when I'm with a European crowd, there's different languages in here. So if you want to ask a question and you're sort of not quite there to formulate it, ask any time, interrupt me any time. I'm not going to feel bad about it. And I know you all don't speak Australian, so I think there's only one Aussie in here, isn't there? So work with me. If you need to ask a question, jump in. It's no problem. So what my environment is here, I'm going to do a couple of demos first. Jim Moyle, who's got a funny accent. Right, Jim. It wasn't the English that sent their convicts to Australia, and look at us presenting now. Anyway, so I'll tell you a little quick bit about the environment I've got it set up. I've got a XenApp 6.5 on the Xen server at the back here. Now I also have a remote connection as well, because I don't want to just show you one in the back of the room that's hiding in the corner that, Citrix like to hide in the corner, and it's all working, folks. I've got one remote as well that I'm going to show you, because I want to show you the difference in the lag and the different speeds, etc. It's very important to note that. And at the moment I've just got an Android device. Jason was using an iPad, but they must have the Citrix receiver on them. Very important. Okay, if you don't put the Citrix receiver, you're not going to get anywhere at all. So when the Citrix Mobility Kit came out, the whole idea was we were going to mobilise apps. We were going to get our existing Windows apps, we're mobilising away, and it was all fantastic. But what they didn't really talk about is that these apps, or an app that you may be writing in the future, could still use the features of the device. And that's an important point here. We've been talking all morning about how we're converting apps, but we're also maybe adding to these apps. We're adding a feature that if we're all Citrix XenApp or WinFrame users from way back, we know what Citrix XenApp, WinFrame, MetaFrame, presentation server was meant to do. It was meant to give us that extension of the device. So when we first got COM ports, we had all our scanners and we plugged in our COM ports. When we plugged in LPT printers, etc. That was what was it called back then? The PN agent, all the various add-ons that you had. That was what they were meant for. And the receiver and the mobility kit can do the same. We can use the camera. We can use the SMS. We can use the phone. I can actually be in a XenApp session and dial out through the phone on a mobile device using this. It's really important to note that. We always talk about we're just converting apps, but we're hoping to add to that. So what I'm going to do very quickly today, and as I said, I'm going to walk and talk into the audience, and I might need to just swap over your cable. Jason, can I just rip that out for a second? Come around here, and hopefully our audio-visual gentleman at the back can pick that up. Waiting for it. Okay, so I've got my Android device. This is a Samsung Galaxy 2, what they call it, 7.0. And I'm actually going to beam this up onto the screen here. So I use a program called MirrorOp, which allows me to beam the screen up. So I'll just connect to that now. And that will hopefully definitely work. Give it a couple of seconds. A couple more seconds. A couple more seconds, and that was working 2 seconds ago. All that goes. So the idea of these apps is that we're going to extend them. So the application I'm going to show you today, when this wants to connect, I'm having a Jason moment now.
Something about the stage.
Yeah, there is something about the stage. Let me come over here where it was working before. It's locked up. Okay. So I was asked for a mining company in Australia, and I'm going to walk into the crowd while this does this. I was asked by a mining company in Australia, I can't mention their name unfortunately, that they had a certain application they ran through XenApp for the last 10, 15 years. And it was a sort of a ERP system that kept track of all their employees. And sorry to the cameraman who has to follow me here, but you don't have to, you can keep on the screen. What they wanted was a better system whereby their miners would walk down onto the site. Now, if you know anything about mines, they go deep underground. And the miners had to clock in at the top, and they actually had to clock in normal time, the old punch card. Remember those punch card clocks? And then they'd go down the mine, and come back up and they punch back on. The problem that was happening was that these miners weren't actually doing anything once they got to the clock on. They wouldn't go down the mine. They were actually popping off to the pub. And then they'd come back when their time was off and they'd clock back on and run away. So that was pretty good because they were getting a good pub run and the employer wasn't getting much out of it. So the employer said to me, we've got to have some sort of device that we can follow these guys going in and out of the actual mines, track them, and go straight back to the ERP system. So the first problem, where was the ERP system? It was on a central system. They were currently running it through a XenApp, so the client on a normal Windows machine was running through XenApp. And they wanted a little bit more, but they wanted to track that person as they carried a device on them. So they all carried, some of them carried iPhones, some of them carried Android devices, company-issued devices. And they wanted to actually get that person and track them as they went down. So when this comes up, and it will eventually, what happened was that we looked at the CMP, the Citrix Mobility Pack. We said, well, what can that do with the current app they've got? Sure, we can shape it and we can turn it into a little mobile app and we say, hey, that's fantastic, it fits the mobile app. And they can walk up to the start of the mine and they can click in and put their time in. But how do we track them? They can still go off the pub. We can use the Citrix Mobility Pack to use the location services of this device and track them wherever they're going. So we can find out their GPS coordinates based on this and feed that back into the ERP system. And people say that's pretty nuts. How are you going to track someone in the ERP system through location services? Well, doesn't it tell us where they are, when they are, etc.? Does anyone think that's a reasonable thing to do to a worker?
Not really.
It's not, is it? But you've got to do it. For workplace health and safety was another reason they needed. Because they said, what if that person said they were injured over near the Big Digger, but they're actually at the pub, standing on a chair, balancing 3 beers, and they fell off, but they said it was at the Big Digger. So that's how we track these people with that structure. And that was really important to the mining site. They said, we've got to have that. And then we sort of went a little bit further with Mobility Pack. And we said, what else can we use with this mobility kit? What else is in a device that we can use that might just work for us? And we all went, what about the camera? What can we do with the camera? Now, I like to ask questions of the audience because I was told London audience don't speak. But that's, no one speaks in audiences. What do you think you could do with the camera for your ERP system at your work? Keep going.
Yeah, so when they actually clocked in or whatever.
Absolutely. So when they actually turn up at the mining site, they can walk up, and just excuse me for a second while I kill this one. They can actually walk up and they can take a photo at the very top of the mine, take a snapshot, and when this comes up, you'll see exactly what I mean. They can take a snapshot. What will that show, but what's the point in taking a snapshot when you're at the top of the mine? Check it's them. What else can you check? What else can you check? What's that?
All the code.
Yeah, absolutely. What else can you check? There's lots of other things. What about the background? You can say, look, I could be down the pub and take a shot of myself and say, hey, here I am. So the background. They may have to stand beside a company logo, something to that effect. Okay, we're on now, which is good. So they may have to stand beside that. There's so many things you could use. You could also send an SMS to the boss if they're not meeting the geographical location. So if I know that my worker has to stand on this spot, take a photo at a background, I'm sending the GPS coordinates back to the XenApp server, I can actually do a check and say, wow, that guy wasn't really on that spot. He was down the pub because the GPS coordinates that I've got mapped into my device, into my ERP system, don't match where this person was. So someone said, well, that's a bit big, brother. That's a bit heavy. Well, absolutely it's a bit heavy. That's the whole idea of what we're trying to do. We're trying to save the worker and the boss from any implications. So I'm going to spin it back and forth and it's going to flip back and forth, which you always love. So they're the things that can be done. That's only a handful of things that can be done. There's many, many other things that can actually work for you. And as I log into here we go. So XenApp face punch. So everyone can see that now? That's excellent. See, I told you can talk and walk and feel like time, and it's fantastic, isn't it? Okay, so PASS, yes, and I just use password as the password. No, I don't actually. I use this one's different. Thought I'd fool everyone. So this one's local, and as I said, I'm going to show you a non-local one, and you're going to have a little bit of a judgment on it, which I'm glad about. But there are some bad things about this. If you're sending any type of photo, video, anything through a device back to your XenApp server, what's the thing we experience now, even without a device? Even without remoteness. What do we experience when we try and play a video through XenApp? Lag and delay and all that stuff. You're going to get it with this too. Okay, so here we are here now. So this is what the worker has to do. They have to walk up with their device, they stand somewhere, they go punch in. It says hold the camera up to the face. Now to prove this isn't trickery, is that you guys? That looks like you guys, doesn't it? So basically, and because I'm spinning it, it's trying to orientate itself, so excuse me for that. So I'm going to take a click, took a camera. This then says, do you want to save this? Okay. Now, I must point out the Citrix Mobility Kit must use your SD card. It actually writes that photo to the SD card. It doesn't go straight back to XenApp. Okay. The next thing it's asking me for is XenApp Face Punch. That's the application I called it, by the way. Is asking for your location. I'll talk about it in a second. I'll press allow. It starts processing that. Now, privacy. Citrix seem to have an issue about privacy and using your data on your phone, even if this is a company device. You have to ask the user for permission. That little pop-up that I had that said, can I use your location? We can't unfortunately turn that off. You have to have that to ask the question. The same with SMS, the same with phone calls, the lot. It's a bit of a bugger, but that's what unfortunately the privacy thing is.
So I would say that's probably fair enough though, because I mean you've got your receiver on, everything's going to the receiver, right?
Correct.
Right. So in actual fact the receiver's got permissions.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you said Facebook can use my location, in actual fact you're not saying Facebook, you're saying this is the receiver.
Correct. So
it breaks the permissions model in the phone because you're not setting permissions on a single app, you're setting permissions on a receiver. So unless you prompt every time, you don't know what's happening.
That's right. That's exactly the point. So the statement that was made by Jim was it's the receiver that's actually asking the permissions, etc. They're the things that have to work through. That's right. I've asked Citrix several times if they can remove that, and they've said no. Not under privacy. And it's even worse under iPhones, by the way. So from an Android point of view, we can do a couple of little skatey things under the goalposts, but with iPhone, forget it. You're not going to get past half this stuff. So there's the picture that we took, and you can only probably just see it up the top there. It's actually got the username embedded in the picture. It's also got the time and the date, and it's got the location services that have been sent off. Now, I just did that as a programmer. I just simply embedded date, time, name, etc. into that whole thing. And the picture's gone. Give it a wiggle. Yep. So I just embedded that as a coder just for something to do. So this actually went further and went into an ERP system. I got the date, the time, who logged in. They didn't enter any of that stuff. That was part of their XenApp session. I pulled that information out. I could get the client IP address. I could get the location service, as I said, which I've done. I could get all those wonderful things. That picture in the real app that I actually wrote got sent back to an ERP system. That is kept every time the person logs in, clocks in. There's a photo of the person, the background of the person, the location services, etc., etc. Okay? That's how simple and easy these things are to do. And I say simple and easy because this is actually its own app that fed into a back-end database. I don't need to worry too much about whether I've got some sort of link to an SQL or whatever. This is just front end. Okay? So that was one demo. The other demo that we actually did for people, and I'll keep the demo short because I want to get into coding soon, is a thing called a Q-code scan. So everybody knows what that is. I think they're everywhere these days, aren't they? QR codes. So someone said to me, they were a big distribution company, and they said, we run around with these stupid little barcode readers and we deliver things all over the country, and we have to synchronise these stupid little things all the time. So how can we maybe get around that? Instead of synchronising, how can this data go straight back to the person? Okay, let me just flick that the right way around. And I said, well, let's use the camera again. So they said, well, how can we use the camera to scan QR code? Now, this was probably about 18 months ago I did this, so everyone says, well, that's not hard. There's plenty of apps now for the iPhone and Android that just scan QR codes. And exactly what they do. You click on the QR code, and it'll go to the camera in a second, and it depends how steady my hand is. I've had a few drinks today. Let's see, well, there's my head. I better turn it to the other camera, and you can do that. So at the moment it's facing me. So I'll spin around to the other camera. I'll whack it on here, and try to get the go. Take the camera again. So again, this asks me to save every time. Every time I take a photo, it says, do you want to use that? Discard it. If you say discard, it'll just go back to the camera until you actually use that. Okay, that'll load the image. Oh, I put it around the wrong way around, spin around. There you go. That crummy picture actually converted, and that actually is www.control@delete.com. That's what that QR code stands for. That converted into that. You notice there's a little star there? That's because I'm using a non-paid for QR code encoder. I won't say borrowed or anything like that, but a non-paid for, so I couldn't use the whole thing. But if you pay for the encoder, so this was any old encoder. I think I got this off, I'm not sure where I got this, but it's an open sort of source one. So see how rough the picture was? That was a pretty rough picture of that QR code. It didn't have to be that big, by the way. I had some other little ones down there. So little tinies. It can be big, tiny. It can have various things around it. The light is the important thing. So if this is really dark, it would not have picked that up. Okay? So that's live demos. What did you notice about the first live demo after I took the photo? Anyone notice anything that I said would be a bad thing? Yeah, the permission thing was one, absolutely, which is terrible. So if you need to take instant pictures, and someone put something to me recently, could I stick an Android phone on a little robot, send it down to mine, and get it automatically take pictures that came straight back to the XenApp server? I said, brilliant, let's do that. Oh, whoops, we've got to press save every time we take a photo. That doesn't work. I asked Citrix whether we could do maybe that. Straight back, privacy, can't do it. So lots of good ideas that come out of it, but there's a lot of restrictions there. But there was one other thing that I probably talked too much that you didn't actually notice what was happening while it was processing. How long did that picture take to come up? I was talking and talking and talking and just sort of looking back and wondering when that picture was going to come up. The reason why is because at the moment, the Citrix Mobility Pack takes that picture at a meg or more. That picture's going to be a meg. Now, if you're coming down a very slow link and you've got to go back to a Citrix XenApp server, so it saves it to the SD card, sends it back to your XenApp server. I was only waiting, and my laptop's right there with the XenApp on it. So it takes a long time because of that problem. Now, in a normal photo situation, when we take our photos of ourselves, of our girlfriends naked, no one does that. That's it, yeah. The photo, we can choose. Do you want to send it as a small size, medium size, large size? So that's something that we talk to Citrix about, and we'll talk about it shortly. They've actually addressed those things. They've addressed all of those items. Okay, so that's the demos. I think I'm done with demos. I'm always excited about demos.
Warren,
Yes.
could you not display the photo from using the native device photo viewer rather than bring it back to the session?
Try that one up again, sorry, Jim.
So, if I'm getting this right, you take the photo,
Yep.
yeah, transfer it back via HTX to your XenApp server,
Yep.
yeah, and then you view it in the app that's coming from your XenApp server.
Correct.
Yeah, so we kind of going up and
Yeah,
back
I'm with
down
you.
again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Could I resize it there?
Well, not that. You know what Jason was talking about using the native phone capabilities?
Yep.
Well, instead of showing the phone via the XenApp application, just bring it up via the local viewer.
Local viewer, I see where you're going. You could do that. In actual fact, I think the CMP2 does something like that. But you're really trying to get it back to the XenApp program in most cases.
That's fine. Well, that's going to go back in its own way anyway.
Yeah.
The user experience is going to be better if you can just show it and say, yeah, we have it. And then at some point that will get back to the XenApp. It doesn't need to be instant, does it? But your user
absolutely. It depends how you code it. And I coded it by saying, I want it back at the XenApp server. So you're quite right, you could hold it there for a while it actually takes a copy and sends it back, and just hold it there. Yeah, certainly could. I just coded it so it went straight back. Okay. So again, that system was being used for a distribution company that said, this is brilliant. We can just do a QR code now, say it was there. Location services again, bang, got them. We can use the time and the date, the person who logged on, everything, blah, 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 blah. So these features are there, and they're the features that I like to talk about, not just the fact you're converting an app from Windows to a mobile experience, you're using the features within. So another one we had, which I won't show you because demos demoed out, was one that I call mobile log off. And as a Citrix administrator, which I'm sure we all are in some ways, who's ever sat at a movie and some bleep, 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 bleep calls up and says, my session's stuck. And you're sitting there going, oh no, I'm in the middle of The Hobbit. I've got another 3 hours to go. And you sit there and say, what am I going to do? Well, we wrote a little app called Mobile Log Off that basically says, okay, I'm going to open up the administration of the XenApp server on my mobile phone. I'm going to tap in, I'm going to choose the username, I'm going to log off. You say, well, that's nothing really new. I could do that with an iPad anyway. But I just have to fiddle with the fingers because the iPad screen's a bit funny. So, okay, we did a bit of shaping there. But the other thing we did was the minute we said log off that user, I'm not going to call that user up in the middle of the movie and say, righto, away you go, you're all good now. I had it so it would SMS that user and say, ready to go. Don't disturb me again. Hobbit's got 3 hours left. All right? So you can do that sort of thing as well. And that's all of these apps are free on our website, which we'll talk about later. And the code, by the way. Okay. So we talk about the various things and we might jump back. Actually, no, we won't jump quite back yet. We're talking heavily about Citrix here. And I'm feeling a little bit ashamed because we're independent at the Brian Madden Forum here, aren't we, Jack? Excellent. Okay, so independence. Just because Citrix did it, who uses just RDP in their shop? Anyone? Anyone? You're all Citrix users? Wow, that's good for Citrix, isn't it? Okay, if you're an RDP user like me, and you want to be able to experience this as well, can you do it? Well, a little bit more work, a little bit more coding, a little bit more smarts, but you can. You can actually just grab an iPhone app, which is actually just called IRDP, written by this gentleman here, and here's their website, we'll talk about later. But this particular gentleman actually has an iPhone app, Android app as well, and a Symbian, and et cetera, where the same sort of thing works, where they use both the camera, the AV, etc., through RDP. The client's $2.99, I think it is. What would make this work? But who can remember their days of what made a difference between Citrix and RDP? What was the difference? What did Citrix do that RDP didn't when it came to COM ports and all that stuff? I'm talking about early days, before RDP started getting a bit smarter. What about virtual channels? There's echoes, that's great. Virtual channels, things like the camera, things like audio, things like HDX sort of stuff. We couldn't do that in RDP a long time ago, or RDS as we call it now. So what do we have to write? We had to write virtual channels for ourselves in RDP. We had to do that. We ran around writing all these DLLs that we had to register on the RDS server so we could use these sort of elements. This young gentleman, I think he's young, wrote one of his own. Basically, you grab your app, you get his DLLs, you put them on your RDS server, and you can do the same sort of thing at a fraction of the cost. So in other words, cost meaning XenApp licenses versus terminal server licenses. So I thought I'd throw that up there because we're independent here. We're trying to talk about the fact that we can do many other things as well. Okay, that's enough of the demos. We're going to do some basic coding in the look of how we do things now. So I hope I'm staying on track. Jason's going to keep me on track. 15 minutes, says Jason. That's not much. Okay, so let's have a look at FacePunch, which you saw there before. And there's going to be two parts of this. Just because I use a mobility kit does not mean that I need to be a programmer for the mobility pack, for the Citrix mobility kit. Okay? In actual fact, I'm going to show you two parts that I do. My aim here today is to say to you, can you get your device, your application, working on any device for your boss or for yourselves, whatever the case might be. I don't really care whether you use the camera or not. I don't care whether you use the location devices. I want to help you get your device, your application mobile that you've got now, without going to iPhone specialists, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. There may be prizes at the end. Yes, there are. So basically, I'm going to open the questioning, and you've got to answer, because I don't keep going until you answer the questions. It's a teacher thing. How do you think, for a start, what's the first thing? You've got this big app that's running in Windows, maybe on XenApp, maybe just RDS. What's the first thing you have to do to make it work on your mobile phone? What's that, sorry? Check you're on a phone. It's a good start. You jumped ahead of me, but that's good. See? Exciting stuff, you'll win a prize. So you check whether you're on a phone, on a mobile device. So I'm going to get to that one in a minute. Excellent answer. What's the next thing you do? Once you've checked you're on a mobile phone or a mobile device, what's the next thing you're going to do? Excellent. Jeez, good audience today. I like this audience. Excellent. We're going to check the device screen size. And that's where I'm going to jump to first. Do I need a Citrix Mobility Kit for that?
Yeah.
Do? You sure? Well, a Citrix Mobility Kit does it for you. So I don't need to code at all. So that's right. That's where thumbs up, Citrix Mobility Kit. But if I'm a coder, now this is C++, so don't get too excited. All right, C# coders, you can still do this as well. If I'm a person that knows my stuff, and sometimes I don't even know where my code is. Okay, here we go here. I write simple code, and I use it again and again and again and again. Okay, there's a little bit of code there, and I hope you can read. That's a bit fuzzy, isn't it? Bit average. For the guys up the front, you can see it. Guys at the back, I'll read it out. What I actually do is I just get the screen size, and I just use a simple Windows SDK structure, get system metrics, and I get the X and the Y of the screen. Now on a mobile device, do you think it's going to be smaller than a standard Windows desktop? I think it would be, most cases. Okay, not always, but sometimes it is. And based on that, I'm going to go back to the fact that I've got to detect it's a mobile device first. But if I detect it's mobile, I'm then going to get the screen size. And that's, see that little bit of code? That's it. That bit of code will tell you what the screen size is. So we'll come back to the statement. First thing we have to do is we actually have to detect whether it's a device. Now I'm going to be a little bit slippery here, and I'm going the Citrix path first. So I wrote this little program, and all those old coders out there will go, I know what that's all about. And all those new coders out there say, well, I know what it's about too. Okay, we'll go there. Who's ever used the WTS SDK, which is the Windows Terminal Server SDK? Anyone use that? A few people in here? Okay, what do you use it for? Yeah, virtual channels. You use it to find the client IP address. Lots of different things you find. In this case, Citrix, everyone knows that this was bought off Citrix. Terminal Server sort of was bought off Citrix many years ago, and Microsoft took what they wanted of it. So in actual fact, if you have a code, if you're using the WF API or the WF SDK, which is the WinFrame SDK from years ago, that's still used in XenApp today. Now, if you go back to the Microsoft SDK, you will find something called WTS API. You're sort of getting the general hint that it's the same thing, but it's got WTS instead of WF. Right? If you code either one, you can actually convert. But some things are missing in WTS, because why would Citrix give everything? And one of those things that was missing was a thing called, the thing that's there is query session information. Now those who have coded, and the gentleman's nodding there, he's going to get a big prize there. That tells you all your virtual channel information. How big your screen size is, what your client IP address is, what virtual channels you've got open, everything. Now, I should point out, what you see here, if you're a PowerSheller, take note, you can do this in PowerShell with exactly the same commands with the PowerShell twist on them. Okay, so go looking for this stuff in the PowerShell APIs. You can do exactly the same. So what we actually do is we say, right, let's have a look at the client product ID, WTS client product ID. Now, if I run that as WTS, it always comes up as 1. If I run under Citrix, and this is where I'm being a little bit cheeky here, I'm showing the Citrix way of doing it. So what I'm trying to do here is find out what device am I running on. If I run that command, the client product ID, This might give you a little bit of hint. I'll start at the top and I'll be nice. And as we scroll, I know the screen's a little bit blurry and I apologise for that. Okay, I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, if I get a return number, so that's what we're getting. It goes down, it queries the device, returns a number. If I get a 1, what sort of device is it going to be? It's a Windows OS. So it's not really a device, it's the OS it's running on. So by the OS we're running, we presume the device is a certain device. We've got to be careful of that sometimes, of course. If I get a 10, I get an epoch device. Who remembers epochs? The little tiny HP thingies? No? Oh, you people aren't old. OS 2, DOS 3.2. Can you scroll that down for me, please, Jason? Wiggle it down. Linux, keep going down. Mac OS, iOS, Android, BlackBerry, Playbook, Windows Mobile, HTML5, Java, WinCE, another type of WinCE, because Wise use their own WinCE, by the way, and an unknown. All of those elements, we can actually use this simple bit of code to find out what device we're on instantly. So I've given you 2 bits of code there today. One saying this is how you find your type of device. I know it's Citrix, but you can do the same internal server. I'll tell you how to do that in a second. And the other is the screen size. With those 2 items, just hang on a second. With those 2 items, we can actually start changing our app at work. So I've got my ERP app that everyone has to use every day. Using those 2 things, how could you change my app to be mobile right now? Just 2 items, that's all I needed. I didn't need a mobility kit. I didn't need anything like that. I've got 2 items. What are you going to do with those 2 bits of code? Firstly, we're going to detect the device. Tick, we're on a mobile device. Second, we're getting screen size. We're going to start reshaping. But what am I going to do? I'm going to write a separate app that then links to my ERP system or something like that. How are you going to do it? Take a shot in the dark. Oh, they're quiet. They are quiet. Come on, brain work here. It's brainstorming 101. Jim, I'll throw your question while I think. How much time have I got, by the way, Jason?
5 minutes.
Oh, lovely.
How good is the SDK documentation? I mean, all those return codes in it?
I'd use the word shithouse, but they bleep it. Did they bleep that? Is there a gap? Time delay? It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. All right, so I had to chase even this code down. Okay, so yeah, absolutely terrible. Okay? All right, let's get back to the question. What would you do? Well, what I've been doing for customers is very simple. And I know we've got a very short amount of time and we didn't get through everything, but I love talking. Once you've got the device, once you've got the screen size, I can do 1 or 2 things. I could write a separate app that then links into the database for the ERP system, but it's not always an ERP system. If I've written that in-house app, or I know the coders, or I've got my development team in-house, instead of going straight to iOS, I need to buy 2 years of development time for iOS. So I'm going to use those 2 things, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to rewrap my exe, I'm going to detect the device. If I'm on a Windows machine, then carry on. Jump to that procedure and work away at the normal everyday pace. But if I'm on a mobile device, I'm going to add a little bit of coding. And I'm going to do some shaping of some buttons, and I'm going to remove some things. But I'm going to make a UI simply for mobile. So 2 bits of code, and you saw how small they were, at the front of your app. So I'm not talking about, as I said, we're not going to get SAP and be clever with SAP, although I've got to say, I have done it. I've wrapped SAP with my own wrapper with this stuff as well. Okay, so it can be done, but you've got your own in-house coders. You need to buy some development time for iOS. You simply jump, get those 2 things. You write a separate UI for mobile, and you're away. The only other thing, because I know I'm out of time, the only other thing I say when I get the device screen size, I've got to reshape my buttons. Everyone loves maths in programming. We all love math. Okay? You get there, you work out the device shape, you say, how many buttons do I need on that screen? 5. I divide that by so much. I need, say, a 20 pixel gap between each one. I add the 20 pixel to each size, and away I go. Okay? So they're the things that I can do. Now, I know I've run us out of time, but I think we can talk shortly about the Citrix Mobility Kit version 2. Is that all? You can talk if you want. Jason's gone quiet. Do I talk a lot? Anyway, so what do we got? I'm going to hand out prizes as we go, by the way. So, as I said, there's a lot of problems with the Citrix Mobility Kit in its version 1. And one of the big things that I had to complain about was the size of the picture downloading. It was just too long, it's ridiculous. And when you've got a big mining company saying, we've got wireless access points everywhere, but that's still not transferring that photo quick enough. So I asked Citrix, could they please make it that we could choose the size of the photo? So Citrix Mobility Kit 2, or Pack 2 in the SDK, and the entire package is going to be released next week at Synergy. So it's actually given us that option. Also, did anyone hear me say I can use the video on my phone? I can't in version 1. In version 2, we can use the video now as well. And we can send the video to the XenApp server. Big feature, okay? The other thing about taking pictures, who knows when you take a picture with the mobile phone, who knows about the hidden data that sits in that JPEG that goes into the mobile phone? Does anyone know what else is there? So when you open up JPEG, your position, what else? Yep, so all the various things. Does anyone know what that's actually called in the EXIF? That's exactly right, EXIF. All that EXIF data now, with the new Citrix Mobility Kit, can be extracted. So from a JPEG. So I can actually take that photo, instead of getting the location services, the phone and all that, I just take the JPEG up to the XenApp server and I just pick out the bits I want. And there's hundreds of items in there. And so I can get the location, I can get the size, I can get the pixel rate, etc. And I get all of that out of the one photo. And for me, that's a big plus. No, only photos that are taken by or with the CMP. Yeah. So are we out of time? Someone looking at me? We're still going, are we? I can talk all day. We can keep going.
Maybe just one or two questions.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, we're going to open some questions. I've got a little bit more to show you, but any questions about that? Has anyone got any ideas? So I've thrown up ideas about mining companies, using it for that purpose. I love ideas. I love turning them into real stuff. And as I said, all this code is free, by the way. All what you see, you can go and grab. If you're a C++ coder, go and see our friend Pierre, who's also a CTP, and he's done a little bit of conversion of some of this stuff as well. So if you're a VB coder, be ashamed. But if you're anyone else, yeah, you're not a VB coder, are you? Good work, mate. Well done. All right. So that's excellent work that you've skilled up, or sideways, or down, whichever way you look at it. But these are the keys that you can do. Okay. So has anyone got any other ideas or any other thoughts about the mobility kit, or even RDP? As I said, you can do it with RDP. No, forget that. But you can. Okay. The key about detecting the device. Yeah, go. Yes?
Yeah. What do you recommend?
I don't. I wouldn't recommend anything in that case, but it's a good point. I should have pointed out too, and we didn't point this out. XenApp is not alone, by the way. XenDesktop will run the CMP as well. I didn't mention that, did I? No. So yeah, XenDesktop will run this as well. Okay? And Windows 8 with RDP will run as well. I didn't actually answer the question of how do I work out the device type if I've got just RDP. I can see how I do it via Citrix. How do I do it via RDP? Who wants a big guess? Come on. So lots of smiley faces, so that's positive. Are you going to guess? Oh, kick me off? Okay. Very quickly, OS. Okay? Think about the OS type. Every version of OS, whether it's on mobile or whatever, has a different version number. So some of the programs are nodding and going, yeah, I get it. It's all about version numbers. Okay, so I've got to get off, but thank you for having me and enjoying this. If you want to see the code, if you want to see all that sort of stuff, you can come and talk to us. We're going to put this up on wherever it gets put up.
I'll take care of it.
But exactly. So Jason, back to you.
No, we're done. Thanks.
Oh, we're done. Thank you very much.